He had mistresses in every country in the world. Each one believed herself to be his only love, and he exploited each one as a cover and a source of information. A mysterious spy, a passionate lover, and a heartthrob. Agent Sydney Reilly is the prototype for the elusive super agent 007. He stirred intense emotions in women, but he loved none, for in his past, this seducer had suffered a dreadful tragedy, losing everything in an instant: his family, his home, and his bride. Who is the man known worldwide from the movies as James Bond?
Indeed, his name was Sigmund Zyama Rosenblum, and he was born in Odesa, into the family of a regular pharmacist.
І народився він в Одесі, в родині звичайного аптекаря.
At that time, no one suspected that the Russo-Japanese War would ignite due to the actions of the unassuming Zyama, and that all counterintelligence agencies worldwide would be on a hunt for him. He was planning an assassination attempt on Lenin. This new Ziama Rosenblum will suddenly emerge when the apothecary's son learns that he will never be able to reunite with his beloved.
In 1925, a car halted in the midst of the Sokolniki forest near Moscow. The driver opened the hood. There were 3 passengers in the car. One appeared to be a foreigner. The driver shrugged his shoulders. Who knows what's wrong with this car? Then the passengers got out to stretch their legs. The foreigner looked around nervously. However, his friends calmed him down and suggested going for a walk. A conversation started. During the conversation, one of them stepped back, drew a revolver, and shot his conversational partner in the back. The latter fell silently. His comrades leaned over him. The injured man was still breathing. Then, a comrade shot him in the chest with a revolver. The people present searched the deceased man. Only one thing was found in the inside pocket of his coat: an old, worn-out photo of a girl. She was the only woman whom spy Sydney Reilly truly loved. The only memento of Ziama Rosenblum's past is the day he learned the devastating truth about his beloved. Ziama Rosenblum hurried through the streets of Odesa. He wanted to shout at the top of his lungs from happiness, to share his news with everyone. Let everyone know. This is the day when he, Zygmunt Rosenblum, became the happiest man in the world. This is the day she said yes. His beloved Felicia. In her presence, Zyama forgot about everything: problems at home, endless quarrels with his fastidious father, and the future that was being planned for him. And this future promised nothing interesting to 16-year-old Zyama. He was the son of a humble pharmacist from Odesa who dreamed of passing on the family business to him, envisioning him solely as a pharmacist. And Zyama himself dreamed of a different, more exciting life. Like many young men, he wanted to traverse the entire globe, make remarkable discoveries, and uncover the grand secrets of history. But his father said it was just a fantasy. Then Zyama would get upset, sigh, and return to making powders. What a challenge it is to be a pharmacist. At that time, no one in the Rosenblum family thought that in just a few years, the apothecary's son would himself influence world history.
Zyama was indeed a gifted apothecary.
Дарованим аптекарем.
His headache tablets were incredibly popular in the city, and a special solution made from arsenic, which numbed the dental nerve, became a true discovery for Odesa dentists.
Знахідкою для одеських дантистів.
But no one knew what the skilled pharmacist found most interesting:
Найбільше цікавило
poison.
трути.
He read the history of infamous poisoners of royal lineage. Catherine de' Medici and the Borgia family, these infamous puppeteers of fate and notorious villains, hundreds were poisoned on their path to glory. Zyama both aspired to match their greatness and at the same time was horrified by their cruelty. The son of the pharmacist didn't know where this fascination originated from, and his family simply overlooked the boy's peculiarities. The father was solely focused on profit. The mother was a compassionate and warm-hearted woman, but she did not comprehend her son's ambitions at all. There was also Aunt Rosa, whom Zyama could not tolerate. Through her teachings, she drove her nephew to insanity. She ridiculed him, foretold a bleak future for him. And once she said, "Zyama, your life will end behind bars." At that moment, neither the aunt nor the outraged Zyama himself understood the depth of this prophecy. Since then, Zyama has become more cautious. He made a mature decision to reprimand his aunt, to do so in a way that was both beautiful and elegant, just as his renowned predecessors had done.
Every night before going to bed, Aunt Rosa would prepare a pot of healing broth for all ailments. In the morning, the aunt diluted the decoction with water and drank it throughout the day. This bank served as the tool for the young avenger's crime. At night, when everyone was asleep, Zyama went to the kitchen and filled a jar with the powder that was his special pride. The poison he produced in small doses caused stomach discomfort and weakness.
Based on Zyama's calculations, the aunt would have to endure several uncomfortable hours in the restroom. However, everything went wrong in the morning. An hour after taking the first dose of the decoction, Aunt Rosa started feeling slightly unwell, and then she fainted. Pale, with shortness of breath, she was put to bed. And Zyama was frightened. He realized what he had done. The dose was too strong. His aunt was on her deathbed. Scared, he dashed into the utility room, grabbed the ready-made antidote, mixed it with water, and forcefully administered it to his aunt. He explained to his parents that this was his new invention, an elixir that alleviates spasms. An hour later, a miracle occurred. The aunt experienced relief, the pain ceased, and she fell into a peaceful sleep. After his aunt's miraculous recovery, Zyama became a hero in their household. He was lauded, hailed as a savior. He triumphantly entered the university's chemistry department, and Aunt Rosa stopped belittling him after that.
The joke about Aunt Rosa, whom he nearly sent to the other world, and then supposedly resurrected in an odd manner, merely attests to the lack of any ethical limits in the character of the still young Zyama.
But what prevented young Zyama from growing up like an ordinary boy, just like his peers? A dreadful family secret that the Rosenblum family has been concealing for many years. This secret will be accidentally uncovered and will irrevocably change Zyama's entire life.
Only 2 years will pass, and flirting with death will become his favorite pastime. He will revel in his power, establishing his own unique work style. He will even see himself as the Almighty God, who has the power to punish and forgive. And once again, a miraculous potion will aid him in this.
After the incident with Aunt Rosa, Zyama recognized for the first time what he was capable of and became fearful of his own power, those outbursts of primal rage that awakened the beast within him. And who knows how his internal mental turmoil would have unfolded if it hadn't been for a pivotal encounter in Zyama's life. a meeting with Felicia, the daughter of his own uncle. He met her in Kherson. His mother's brother, Uncle Zyama's family, lived there, and the gentle, calm sister Felicia left a deep impression on the young man. They met in secret, as if they were afraid that everything could vanish in an instant. They looked forward to the future, relishing the idea of their parents' shocked expressions when they eventually disclosed their secret. The family will be shocked by the news, but of course they won't object. Could they hope for a more successful alliance?
The end of the 19th century. At that time, marriages between first cousins were commonplace and did not cause public condemnation. It seemed to the lovers that nothing could prevent them from being together. They considered each other kindred spirits and had no idea how close they really were.
And now the joyful Zyama hurried home. Felicia responded yes to his proposal of marriage. Could he dream of more? He hurried home as quickly as he could to the one person who would understand and share his joy, his mother. Zyama rushed into the room and blurted out the news that made him joyful. And then the mother turned pale and started trembling. Zyama was confused. He assisted his mother to get up, revived her consciousness, and was taken aback. Now she was looking at him coldly, unapproachably, speaking about his youth and inexperience, about his entire life ahead of him. And the most important thing she said was at the end. Don't even dare to think about marriage. Cannot. Zyama was shocked. They will still get married whether their relatives want it or not. He threw all of this in his mother's face, and then a terrible incident occurred. He will never forget his mother's soft voice, muffled by sobs. He wanted to cover his ears, to scream, just to avoid hearing the terrible truth, but Zyama could not move. Felicia is a beautiful girl, said the mother, and you, Zyama, cannot help but love her, because this feeling has been ingrained in you from birth. It just happened. I was hoping you'd never find out. Felicia is not your cousin. Felicia is your actual sister.
It was a dreadful family secret that his mother had concealed from him for 16 long years. Zyama was not the son of his father. He is the result of a clandestine, forbidden love between his mother and his uncle. It turns out that his sweetheart is actually his half-sister, born to a different mother, and she can never become his wife, as they share the same father.
He lay motionless in a locked room. His head was throbbing with pain. The world around him, his dreams and desires, everything was shattered. All these years, his family has been deceiving him. The man he believed to be his father wasn't, and he was completely unaware of it. The mother was revealed to be a prostitute, and the beloved girl turned out to be a sister.
In his mind, Zyama kept asking, well, why didn't they tell me immediately? Why didn't they inform me? Why did they conceal it from me? After this significant upheaval, when he was let down by his mother, he felt that everything was permissible to him. After all, if they deceived him, it implies that he is also permitted to deceive.
Felicia, who didn't understand anything, was told by Zyama that their marriage was impossible. He cast a devastating glance at his uncle, started to despise his mother, and personally penned a few words on a piece of paper. Life has lost its meaning. Search for my body at the bottom of the Odesa harbor. That day, Ziama Rosenblum vanished forever. Upon seeing their son's farewell note, the parents hurriedly began to search, but they could not locate the body of Sigmund Rosenblum.
Here is the Odesa harbor. It's a very vast area, and it would be impossible to search it. There was one clue. The Rosenblum's boat was docked at berth number 18. It was from here that the search for Sigmund's body began.
Not far from here, a dirty coat that belonged to Zyama was retrieved from the seabed using a hook. Stones were attached to his sleeves. No further traces of the guy were found, and his relatives believed he committed suicide. The mother blamed herself for her son's death. The shock was so intense that she soon fell gravely ill and passed away a few months later, never having discovered that her Zyama was alive and thousands of miles away from her hometown of Odesa. Ziama Rosenblum indeed died on that terrible night. He submerged his resentments, agony, and shattered love in the depths of the Odesa harbor. Exactly 1 month after his disappearance, a completely different Zyama disembarked on the shores of Britain. He was cold, cautious, devoid of all illusions, and angry at the world.
He felt that he was entitled to everything, because life had treated him unfairly, as he perceived it. If life has treated him unjustly, then he will respond to life unjustly.
Britain greeted Zyama with a cold, unfriendly demeanor. Immigrants who arrived by the thousands in pursuit of employment and a better life were not welcomed here. What awaited them were impoverished living conditions, filled with perpetually hungry children, street beggars, bandits, and prostitutes. And just a dozen blocks from here, the wealthy lived. They led a life of luxury and comfort. They didn't need to work. They didn't have to worry about food and shelter. Zyama envied them. He secretly dreamed of becoming a part of that grand social circle, about which he had heard so much, and now he was waiting for the perfect moment to reveal his talents to this elevated society. In London, Zyama was supported by Russian political emigrants. They were previously exiled aristocrats, and Zyama told them his first fictional story. In Russia, he was a covert anti-monarchist activist, but the authorities discovered his activities, and he was forced to escape, leaving his family and kin behind. He will never see them again. It's all over for him now.
They comforted him, tried to divert his attention. The immigrants had no idea that the noble refugee was actually a schoolboy. He was never involved in political conspiracies. He was accepted into the company, unaware that from now on, every inappropriate word he uttered would be known to the head of the special branch of the London police. Zyama went there to introduce his new friends.
A specific employer regularly paid for primary information. This enabled Zyama to earn his first small fortune. He also gained invaluable experience that will become the main asset in his life. There, among Russian political exiles, he will discover his most valuable talent. Easily earn people's trust, draw them in, even make them fall in love with you. And then use it to your advantage. It was there that he first realized how much women were attracted to him.
A proud, enigmatic gaze, a noble sorrow. Over time, he will learn to utilize all this to his benefit. The women in his life will be the perfect means to achieve his goals. They will become part of his grand scheme. Zyama's first romantic adventure was an affair with the young writer Ethel Lillian Voynich. She gathered materials for her novel The Gadfly among Russian emigrants. Later, this will bring her worldwide fame. It was Zygmunt who captured her imagination more than anyone else in society, and soon a passionate romance blossomed between them. However, the relationship did not last long. Voynich was married, and her husband did not understand her fascination with the elusive Odesa. Soon the novel The Gadfly was published. After reading it, Rosenblum realized that in the depiction of the noble martyr for the cause, the Gadfly, there is a part of him, Zyama. He really admired the countenance of the melancholy warrior for justice. After reading the book, he donned the Gadfly mask, never to remove it again. It was then that he realized what he had to do. Now, wherever he went, Zyama spread the rumor that he was the original model of Gadfly. It was about him that the smitten Ethel Voynich wrote her noble fighter hero. Now one could say to any woman, "Darling, that's how it should be. Duty comes before everything else." And then vanish without any details or explanation. Any base passions can be concealed behind nobility and detachment.
The Gadfly is just the first of the legends. Throughout his life, Zyama would create many such myths about himself. Researchers will spend years unraveling this incredible web of contradictory facts before finally comprehending. Zyama created his pseudo-biographies with one objective in mind: to conceal a crime that reveals a renowned spy to the world. Sydney Reilly, the inspiration for James Bond.
The secret transformation of immigrant Ziama Rosenblum into spy Sydney Reilly was first unveiled by English researcher Andrew Cook. For 20 years, he gathered the required documents and studied the archives of British intelligence. He finally discovered the key to the mystery, how everything was in actuality. Zyama has not found his place yet. 7 years have passed since he arrived in London, and he is no closer to realizing his dream. Could his fleeting affairs with married women have provided him with all this? Yes, they helped as much as they could. They did not hesitate to spend money, secretly pawning off men's jewelry. But he wanted more. It was then that Zyama recalled his childhood fascination with chemistry and decided to take action. Despite not having a university degree or a license, he established the company through the use of bribes. This company sold life-saving medications for various diseases. In reality, he was producing ordinary herbal pills, the modern equivalent of dietary supplements. The business took off quickly. And then destiny provided him with an incredible opportunity. He met the wife of a wealthy priest. The priest was a weak, frail old man. But he had one significant advantage: the capital that his young wife, Margaret, will inherit after his death. Looking at the young, reckless wife of the priest, Zyama immediately understood what to do. He seduced Margaret. She fell madly in love. And then everything unfolded, just like in Agatha Christie's novels. Only the elderly priest stood in the way of profound, pure love. And then Zyama remembered Aunt Rosa's decoction.
The lovers acted with cold hearts. Biographers of Zyama would later refer to this unsolved crime as the perfect murder. Thought through to the smallest detail, without leaving any physical evidence.
One night in his hotel room, the elderly priest took another pill for all his ailments. And in the morning, he was found dead. His young wife was not there. She had gone to her mother's house. But there was a doctor nearby. He confirmed the death of Father Thomas. The conclusion was unequivocal: cardiac arrest. Any doctor would question this diagnosis, because all deaths are ultimately caused by cardiac arrest. But what caused the cardiac arrest? Fortunately for Ziama Rosenblum, who disguised himself as a doctor, no one suspected anything.
When a person loses connection with their mother and family, they lose their grounding. This includes the loss of the moral and ethical foundation of life. This person has vague notions of what is good and what is bad, what you can and cannot do, what is condemned, and what, on the other hand, is glorified. This person begins to act in isolation, as if only he or she exists and everyone else doesn't. Such a person develops a sense of impunity, and on the other hand, lack of principles.
After the priest's sudden death, Margaret returned to the city. The grief-stricken widow refused to allow an autopsy on her husband's body. 36 hours later, she witnessed the deceased's last journey with surprising speed. 2 weeks later, the widow got remarried. In the church registry, her fiancé wrote his name as Sydney Reilly. That was Margaret's father's name. This name will be carried by Ziama Rosenblum from Odesa.
He was happy. Everything was going well. Now, it seemed, nothing would prevent the former Ziama Rosenblum from achieving his dream. However, Reilly's optimistic plans were hindered by the past. It turns out that all this time, the head of the Special Police Department was closely monitoring his former protege. The abrupt demise of Father Thomas and the equally unexpected marriage of Zyama, along with the change of her surname. The police chief assembled these facts and summoned the recently identified Mr. Reilly for a discussion. Reilly came out of the special unit smiling. Life was becoming increasingly interesting. He was threatened with arrest, but he agreed to do a favor for the police. So they forget about this entire story. He did not dislike the new assignment from the police chief. Rather, it served as a reminder of our identity. Commit a massive fraud and remain undetected.
In the counterintelligence department, Reilly was given a cache of Russian rubles seized by the British and the assignment to exploit his connections and inundate Russia with counterfeit bills. He set to work with enthusiasm. This is where his experience as a chemist proved useful. Counterfeits. Millions of Tsarist rubles turned out to be of very high quality.
At that time, Russia was undergoing the Stolypin reforms. The economy was booming, and the country's military power was growing every day. This development frightened Britain, who viewed the emerging country as a dangerous competitor. The plan to destabilize the Russian economy was developed a long time ago. However, to avoid damaging the country's reputation, it had to be carried out by a person who purportedly acted on their own accord. Reilly became that person.
Reilly's hometown assists him in this infamous scam. The city to which he once swore never to return. He uses his pharmaceutical company's equipment to print counterfeit money. He arranges the shipment to Russia via his hometown Odesa. Millions of counterfeit bills, smuggled regularly, arrive at this port.
Soon, panic erupted in Russia. The national currency was gradually devaluing amidst a flood of high-quality counterfeits. By the decree of Tsar Nicholas II, the Royal Guard initiated an investigation. Gradually, the crime trail led to Mr. Sydney Reilly in London. It seemed like it was over, and he was exposed. Tsarist police officers are dispatched to London with an arrest warrant. But the search proved futile, and Reilly vanished without a trace. He is no longer permitted to stay in Britain, and he, along with the head of the Special Police Department, are currently on leave. Reilly accomplished his mission. Now he can do as he sees fit. Start a new life by disappearing.
Realizing that he is being observed by the Royal Guard, he behaves extremely defiantly. He's heading straight into the lion's den, to the place where he is least likely to be found, on Russian soil, to the small town of Port Arthur.
At that time, The small town of Port Arthur was the epicenter of the political conflict between Russia and Japan. This territory was owned by China, which leased the peninsula to Russia for an extended period. It was an ideal location to establish a base for the Pacific Fleet. And this is precisely what concerned Japan. The country viewed Russia's presence in this territory as a threat to itself. The situation between the countries was becoming increasingly tense, and war was brewing. Reilly was well aware of this and understood how he could capitalize on the situation. First, no one will look for him here. Secondly, war has always been a lucrative opportunity for adventurers. This year, a young married couple arrived in Port Arthur. Russian businessman and lumber trader Isakovsky and his wife Margaret. The local community welcomes them with open arms. Suddenly, in Port Arthur, Reilly Isakovsky assumed an unexpected role for himself. He is a worn-out husband suffering from his wife's alcoholism. Margaret doesn't even know about this presentation. Why would Mr. Reilly insult his wife like that? He just now realized that Margaret would interfere with his Napoleonic plans. She was simply an unnecessary burden, and she was excessively jealous as well. She causes scenes for him in the presence of other women. She prevents him from obtaining such valuable information. So he had to eliminate it. And soon he found a solution to the situation. He sent his wife to London, explaining that a war was imminent. The most important thing for him is the safety of his beloved. Reilly did not tell his wife that the war was going to start with his assistance.
Japan planned to initiate a conflict with Russia by launching a large-scale assault on its primary naval base at Port Arthur. There was only one obstacle for Japan. Without the blueprints of the Russian fort's defenses, the Japanese couldn't hope for a successful assault. Sydney Reilly's contribution in this case was invaluable.
Reilly, now a merchant, known as Isakovsky, was well acquainted with the family of the chief engineer of the Russian fleet, Pyotr Ivashkovich. The engineer was a respected family man, a loving father who would do anything for his children. Hence, when calamity struck the family and the youngest daughter fell ill, Ivashkovich was terrified. The girl was vanishing before his eyes. Doctors could not determine what caused this unusual disease. No one suspected that the sudden illness was caused by the ice cream that Uncle Isakovsky gave to the girl. Now he was genuinely concerned about her health. He even brought a Chinese healer he knew. The man gave the ill girl some potion. And a miracle occurred. The child recovered. The girl's father was so grateful to his friend Isakovsky that he was ready to fulfill any of his wishes. And then the businessman asked for a small favor. He wanted to examine the classified defense plans for Port Arthur purely out of curiosity.
Petro Ivashkovich will soon be incarcerated. He will never discover that his daughter was poisoned by the businessman Isakovsky himself, who slipped the poison into the ice cream. The Chinese doctor was a corrupt charlatan who merely provided the girl with the necessary antidote. And ultimately, Isakovsky was not a businessman, but a spy. He sold defense plans for Port Arthur to Japan.
In 1904, the Japanese seized Port Arthur. A year later, Japan triumphed over Russia in the war. Thousands of people died in this war. But Mr. Reilly's remorse did not disturb him. Japan paid him a handsome sum for his defense plans for Port Arthur. Now all the world's intelligence agencies were echoing the name Reilly in every possible way. Everyone was confused about who this super agent was working for. He worked solely for himself. He wasn't going to stop there. The subsequent years turned into a great adventure for him. He provided Tsarist Russia with faulty rifles and ammunition, stole and sold blueprints of the latest German weapons to Great Britain. In all his endeavors, he was reliably safeguarded by women who loved him, and each of them believed that she was the one and only for Reilly. He told each of them a fictitious story about his grand mission. This wild roller coaster of adventures abruptly came to a halt in 1917. What happened in Russia has shocked Sydney Reilly. How did a group of unknown revolutionaries overthrow the Tsar? Who are these people? Through its channels, Reilly learned that Russian affairs were of great interest to British intelligence. He offered his services. Soon, the independent spy adventurer became a full-fledged agent of British intelligence. He returned to Russia under the surname Rylinsky for an assignment. He needs to evaluate the situation in the country and inform Britain about the ongoing events. Instead, in Moscow, Agent Rylinsky developed a plan for an anti-Bolshevik coup. Latvian riflemen, discontented with the Soviet regime, were set to become the driving force of the coup. The operation was supposed to be prepared by Easers. In the final scene, it was implied that British agents were going to assassinate Lenin and Trotsky, and the leader of the Socialist Party, Boris Savinkov, will assume power in the country.
The primary motivation for our hero was not money, but rather recognition. The more daring the plans our hero devised, the more challenging and perilous tasks he set for himself and overcame. For each of these tasks, he attempted to utilize as many visual tricks and effects as possible.
He had several options: to directly attack the government meeting and eliminate everyone present. The second option, take Trotsky and Lenin and march them bare through Red Square. He thought about mocking them.
London approved the plan and allocated Reilly a substantial amount of money to bribe the Latvian command. They weren't going to fight for nothing, so Reilly started training. In Moscow, he establishes a network of covert apartments where he meets with agents and discusses the plot for a coup. The owners of such apartments are usually young and attractive women. They are not interested in the guest's actions, but they are very interested in the guest. Each of them is his girlfriend, and he promises to marry each one of them. Reilly doesn't even realize. His entire strike force, the commanders of the Latvian riflemen, are actually operatives of the GPU. The security forces are merely waiting for an opportune moment to apprehend all the insurgents at once. The operation's failure was hastened by the SRs themselves. There was a division within their ranks. Some advised to take your time and prepare thoroughly. Others, on the other hand, urged not to waste time and to take decisive action. It was these radicals who attempted to assassinate Lenin in August 1918. And then the head of the All-Russian Emergency Commission, Felix Dzerzhinsky, announced, "The British imperialists and their allies, the socialist revolutionaries, are attempting to dismantle the young Russian state." The Red Terror started in the country, and Reilly was revealed. However, the spy's intuition did not fail him, and he vanished just a moment before the arrest. At his hideout, the Cheka arrested 18 of Sydney Reilly's mistresses.
But this was not what impressed the Chekists. Gathering all of the agent's mistresses in one room, they expected to see tears and remorse. But it turned out quite differently. The women were not disturbed by the threat of execution. They were concerned about jealousy. The night in the cell was restless. 18 women competed for the love of Sydney Reilly.
Meanwhile, the heartthrob himself was far away in England. The failure of the operation haunted him. Assassination of Lenin, anti-Bolshevik coup. It all felt so vivid. And now, for the first time in his life, he failed. The elusive super spy met his defeat in his homeland, Ukraine. This thought saddened Reilly. He dreamed of returning to the place where he lost at any cost to settle the matter. Meanwhile, in Russia, the spy Sydney Reilly was tried in absentia as the orchestrator of the anti-Bolshevik uprising. He was sentenced to death by firing squad. But how to neutralize a British agent? The plan was developed by Felix Dzerzhinsky, the head of the Emergency Commission. In 1925, expatriate monarchists approached the disheartened, shattered ex-spy with a request. They invited Mr. Reilly to head a new anti-Bolshevik underground movement. They provided him with money, connections, and their personnel on the condition that he would assist them in executing a coup. And Reilly felt that this was a long-awaited opportunity to redeem himself from his defeat.
Reilly was literally thrilled with the opportunities that were opening up. At most, he was promised $50,000 in exchange for organizing a series of thefts of valuable jewelry and antiques from Russian museums.
The only thing that frightened him was the prospect of going back to Moscow. Mr. Reilly did not want to meet with Cheka agents. The woman was the decisive factor in this case. The only woman who managed to outwit Sydney Reilly himself. The woman's name was Maria Schultz. She was introduced by Reilly as an aristocratic monarchist who also participated in the planning of the coup. It would appear that this is just another example of the so-called weaker sex, which is supposedly easy to conquer. However, this time, everything was different. For the first time, Maria has ensnared the cold-blooded, calculating spy in his own trap of seduction. He fell victim to sophisticated seduction. Maria looked at him with the same affectionate eyes as Felicia once did. In love, she sincerely awakened old emotions in the agent's frozen heart. He felt like his 18-year-old self, Zyama again, who simply wanted to love and be loved.
Maria Schultz persuaded him to join the fight for the new Russia. Reilly couldn't refuse. It was then that he made the biggest mistake of his life. He crossed the Russian border only to fall into a trap from which there was no escape.
The fairy tale of perfect love concluded in Moscow. Reilly was arrested right at the station, and Maria Schultz reported on the completed work. Mr. Sydney Reilly's final love interest turned out to be a seasoned spy for Soviet Russia.
The Soviet Secret Service completely outsmarted Reilly. He was even permitted to write a letter to England, in which he assured that he was in good hands and safe. And literally half an hour later, he became a prisoner, handcuffed in cell number 73 in the internal prison of the OGPU at Lubyanka in Moscow.
He felt shattered, devastated. He stared into the darkness of the prison cell with a desperate, almost insane look. He is holding a crumpled, worn photograph that he has always carried in a secret pocket. Felicia, the only person he truly loved. The security officers found this photo among the items confiscated from Reilly, but he insisted on keeping it. However, they were not in a rush to kill him. First, it was to assess how useful Agent Sydney Reilly could be. The Chekists demanded he reveal the names of other agents exiled to the USSR. He was desperately inventing something, clinging to life. He realized that the key point was to persuade the Bolsheviks that they needed him. The interrogations lasted several weeks. Throughout this entire period, Reilly has not provided any valuable information. It turned out that he had always only worked for himself. That's why he didn't know the names of foreign intelligence agents and organizations. The Chekists understood that they needed to eliminate this British citizen. However, this should be carried out discreetly to prevent an international scandal. And then, on the evening of November 5th, 1925, two counterintelligence officers invited Mr. Reilly for a ride.
On November 5th, Feduleyev, a counterintelligence officer, along with 3 other Chekists, drove Reilly to the Sokolniki forest on the outskirts of Moscow. There, the driver pretended to have a car breakdown. He was invited to go for a walk. During the stroll, amidst a lively conversation, a Chekist named Ibrahim shot Reilly from behind. He silently fell to the ground, and Chekist Feduleyev fired a confirming shot into the chest.
He was buried in the yard of Lubyanka. Silently, covertly, they destroyed everything related to the case of the British intelligence officer. But there is still something remaining. Transcripts of his interrogations in Lubyanka, and the peculiar account of the prison guard who observed the last hours of the agent's life. This report states, the night before the execution, prisoner Reilly wept on his knees over a picture of a girl. Felicia was captured in this photo. His love for her gave birth to the super agent, Sydney Reilly. And it was this love that eventually destroyed him.